but I think our group is settling in. So grateful to have all of you and your input and feedback today and the conversation that we're going to have. And really appreciate, I know some of you have been at multiple meetings. So whether this is your only one or if you've been coming to multiple workshops, we just so appreciate the time you're putting into this and are excited about the partnerships that we're building to be able to do this work. So I'm going to kick us off just with a few kind of high-level opening comments. First of all, why are we here? This is the Community Economic Resilience Fund Capacity Building and Technical Assistance Subcommittee Workshop. So Valley Vision is working on creating the application as the regional convener for our region's CERF application. We're going to talk in more detail about the CERF program, but as an overview, the CERF program offers 2 phases, a planning and an implementation phase. Right now, we're applying for the planning phase, which is an opportunity to get $5 million in our region to plan inclusive and sustainable economic development efforts. The purpose of these workshops is to provide a forum both to start to build our coalition, because that's a central tenet of this program, that they're really looking for regional vision with co-owned strategies. So this is our kind of our building blocks to doing that, knowing that a lot more is going to come during the planning phase. And then also, as we're building this application, which is due July 25th and is just right around the corner, we're trying to start to get community input and make sure that we are building the opportunity for us to do co-owned solutions together as we get into the planning phase. So I think we can let's not go into the slideshow yet, because I want to make sure we do introductions. My name is Evan Schmidt. I'm the CEO of Valley Vision. I think we're all know each other to some degree, but Valley Vision, as I mentioned, we're applying to be the regional convener for CERF. We're also a nonprofit and civic leadership organization in Sacramento, advancing economic prosperity, social equity, and sustainable environment through our initiatives within this region. So what I'd like to do first is provide an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. So I'm going to call on people just in the order they appear on my screen, and just ask you to introduce yourself with your name, your organizational affiliation, and where you are in the region. And we'll start from there. And I'm going to start with Katie.
Had to unmute. My name is Katie Burdick. I live in Auburn. I work quite a bit. My focus is in Yuba County. I've worked in the Integrated Regional Water Management, IRWM program down there since I think 2010. And so have a background in everything from writing EIRs to resource management plans to disadvantaged community outreach to capital improvement planning, blah, blah, blah. So that's me.
Thank you, Katie. Welcome. We'll go to Jennifer Diaz.
Good morning. Jennifer Diaz with the Colusa County Chamber of Commerce, and we are Colusa County.
Thank you. Welcome. I'll go to Sue Yee next.
Sorry, I was busy taking notes. Sue Yee Alex, Director of Sacramento Valley SBDC. We started our service January this year. Hosted by California Capital Financial Development Corporation. We're one of the 16 service centers covering 35 counties in Northern California as part of the NorCal SBDC network. As far as our center is concerned, we serve Yuba, Yolo, Sutter, and Sacramento. Thank you.
Great, thank you for being here. And Jim.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Alves with SMUD. We're the electric utility provider for Sacramento County and a small portion of Placer County. So I help facilitate our economic development efforts and initiatives such as this. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Great, welcome. Thanks for being here. And Deborah.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Deborah Muramoto. I'm President and CEO of California Capital Financial Development Corporation. We are located in Sacramento, and depending on our programs, we cover the entire state, or as Suyi alluded to, 4 counties for our SBDC. So we're very happy to be part of this group. Thank you for including us.
Great, welcome, and thanks for being here. And Tracy.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Tracy Shaw, and I'm CEO for Community Strong Strategies, a consulting firm specializing in inclusive economic development and community relations. I currently serve as the project lead for the Sacramento Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative, affectionately known as SAC-IEDC, which is 16 partners focused within the city of Sacramento, and it brings together all of the partners that are focused on inclusive economic development in 10 geographical areas within the city of Sacramento.
Hey, Tracy, welcome. Jason.
Morning, everybody. Jason Rafter. I'm the Apprenticeship Director for the Ironworkers Apprenticeship Program, covering California, Nevada, and Arizona. I am located in Sacramento, California, and out of Sutter County, though.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome. And Ashley.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Potochnik. I work for the city of Yuba City as a development liaison. So I'm located in Yuba City, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. Paul.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Towers. I just back from a week of vacation, so catching up here. And I have to hop off at 10, just heads up. But yeah, with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, or CAF, we're based in Yolo County, although we serve the entire state, mostly small, mid-scale farmers, as well as involved in regional food system activities. I also work with the Sacramento Food Policy Council here in Sacramento.
Great, thanks for being here. And Matt.
Good morning, Matt Miller, Research and Strategy with Greater Sacramento Economic Council, Regional Economic Development, serving the SAC and Yuba City MSAs.
Thanks, Matt. Joanna.
Good morning, Joanna Lassard with the Yuba Water Agency. I'm a project manager in our new resource planning division. I lead our watershed resilience program and help to coordinate the Yuba Integrated Regional Water Management Program.
Great, thanks, Joanna. Welcome. And Juan.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Juan Novello, Vice President for the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Great. Hi, Juan. Welcome. All right, I'll go to our Valley Vision team, starting with Alana.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alana Ramsey. I'm a project associate here at Valley Vision. I'm happy to be here with you all today.
And Isa.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here with you all. My name is Isa Avansanya. I'm the Manager of Research and Policy at Valley Vision. I am based out of Sacramento, but currently in Berkeley, cat sitting for a friend of mine. So you may or may not see big fluffy orange tail crisscrossing across the screen in the next couple of hours. Good to be here with you all.
Thanks, Isa. Renee.
Good morning, Renee John, Director of Workforce Development with Valley Vision.
And Carrie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie McDonald. I'm the Senior Director of Business Operations at Valley Vision.
And Brittany.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brittany at Valley Vision. I'm Executive Associate.
Thanks, Brittany. And I want to shout out the Valley Vision staff for all the work on these materials and the logistics of these workshops and all the communications you've been seeing. Everyone's been doing a great job of advancing our interest in CERF. So thank you, Alana, Isa, particularly been very busy this week with I think 4 workshops. So thanks to everybody. All right, so going back to setting the stage, a couple of things, just kind of housekeeping for this meeting that I'll note. One is, I mentioned earlier, I know some of you are attending multiple of these workshops. And one of the good things about virtual workshops is you can balance priorities. So there might be some things that are a little bit redundant that you've already seen, like this speech, for example. So please feel free to make yourself comfortable as this meeting goes on. And if you're seeing something you've already seen and we'll try to give you a heads up where we have those redundancies, and but feel free to answer an email or do what you need to do. The other thing is we blocked 3 hours for this. And I would say that I think it's likely we won't need our whole 3 hours today. We're going to really try to be respectful of your time. So we really want to have this conversation with you and build this foundation together. And we also want to, want to let you get on with your morning. So just a heads up about that. A few things just about the application process right now. I mentioned before that it's an application for the planning phase. It's due in 2 weeks. So what we're doing on this application is planning to plan, and it's pretty open-ended. So the goal is really to start to set our coalition, to start to build our container with our common ideas and our co-owned solutions, and then to really take the planning phase to do things like, very intentionally set the stage to support people's capacity to participate, create a framework for common decision-making, distribute resources in a way that our partners are doing the work that you're doing that aligns with the CERF activities. So just want to note that we don't have to figure everything out in these next 2 weeks, and we don't have to have everything shaped in our application. We just need to start to put things together in a way that is setting our region up for success during this planning phase. Let's see, I'm just looking at the slide to see if I've missed everything. And I will note this is definitely a working session. So, we see here messy but meaningful, and we'll get there together. That's really the intention we're putting out in the world, is that we're trying to build a very inclusive process, a fairly lightweight design with the ability to get everybody's ideas. And like I said, kind of set us on a path to be able to plan together once the CERF application is in and the resources have been awarded to our region. And then finally, I want to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. This allows us to share with others who weren't able to be here. It allows us to document our engagement processes, and it helps us with our notes and things like that. Okay, I think, let me talk a little bit about our agenda today. So we've already done welcome and introductions. I'm going to turn it over to Isa in a minute to do an overview of the CERF program. We're going to talk a little bit about setting our values together. We're going to give an overview of the framework, especially around technical assistance and capacity building, because that's really our deep dive right now. We'll have time for questions and answers and some initial reflections, and then we're going to go into a Jamboard working session, and that's really going to be the bulk of our session today, to talk about what are the needs around capacity building and technical assistance that will help support organizations to participate, that will help support our ability to build implementation projects, and that will help our collaborative learn and develop together. So with that, I think I will turn over to our next agenda item, which is providing a CERF overview. Isa?
Thanks, Evan. And hi again, everyone. Good to be here with you all today. So I know many of you are already familiar with the CERF program at this point, but we think it's always helpful to just start with a very quick recap of the basics of the program. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as Evan noted, the CERF program, it's a one-time use of state general funds that will distribute about $600 million to regions across California. The CERF program has kind of three big pillars in its mission. The first is to promote equitable and sustainable economic development. The second is to support inclusive economic planning that prioritizes equity, job quality, and sustainability, or low carbon industries. And the third is to align and leverage other sources of state and federal funding that are coming down the pipeline to make sure our region is able to really take advantage of this opportunity to become more economically resilient and prosperous. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the 8 counties that make up our CERF designated Sacramento region. So they include Colusa, El Dorado, Nevada, Placer, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties. The CERF program is taking place in 2 phases. The first is the planning phase, which is the phase that we are currently in the process of applying for. In the planning phase, each of the 13 CERF designated regions receive $5 million to fund an 18 to 24 month planning process. And the two kind of major outcomes of that planning process are first, the formation of a collaborative of folks that is representative of the different counties and communities in the region. And second, an actual economic development plan that kind of outlines, what are the region's priority initiatives and projects that would advance the mission of the CERF. And then coming on the heels of that, the second phase is the implementation phase. So in the implementation phase, regions compete for the remaining $500 million pot to be able to fund those initiatives and projects that were identified as priorities in the planning phase. So the next thing we're going to do this morning, and we start all our subcommittees with this piece around setting our values for this CERF endeavor. Next slide, please. So back in May and June, Valley Vision and our partners hosted a couple of kind of open to all lunch and learn sessions about the CERF. And as part of those sessions, we did kind of an interactive activity around asking folks, what are some of the values you see as being part of a healthy collaborative? What are some of the values you see as being kind of core to this CERF process? And we took all that input and we were able to combine it into these kind of 5 core values. And so each of our subcommittee meetings, we kick it off by showing the subcommittee these 5 values, and I'll read through them in a little bit, and kind of getting a sense from folks, are these 5 values things that, do they resonate with you? Is there anything here that you don't agree with? Or more importantly, is there anything that you feel is missing from here that should be incorporated? And then that feedback we would take and use it to inform and revise these values ahead of submitting our application. So our 5 values are, the first one is equity. So we are centered on those who are most marginalized. The second is inclusivity. We ensured that those at the table truly feel that they belong, so no community is left behind. Transparency, we openly share information and ideas to build a community of trust and shared understanding. Respect, we respect and acknowledge previous and ongoing work. And action, we commit to creating action-oriented goals and timelines and following through. Thank you, Alana. I see that Alana's putting in the chat these values, so we'll take it off screen share for a moment. You can still see the values in the chat. And just want to pause here and get folks' reaction to these. Again, are these values that are resonating with you, and is there anything that you feel is missing from this that we need to incorporate? I'll note as well that I know some folks are hearing this for the first time, so this will be part of, as we noted, we as a follow-up to this, we send out the materials and kind of a survey link. So I know folks are hearing this for the first time, no expectation for folks to have an initial ready to go reaction. So if you want to take these and think about it, you will also have the opportunity to provide feedback in the survey that we send out after.
Can I ask a question on the values, Isa?
Yes, go ahead, Brenda.
So these values are for our statements for how we'll work together. The values are not necessarily for, and there probably will be crossover, but for the planning, the outcomes of the planning project itself.
Yes, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, no, that's right, Brenda. We started with these values as we were talking about our governance structure. So in that subcommittee, and then we've been kind of iterating for each meeting. So for example, a couple things that have come up that are more oriented towards the planning phase has been to make sure we integrate environmental sustainability into our strategies. And a couple more that we've been taking note of as we revise these. But I think that these aren't so much outcomes oriented, like you said, more oriented towards how we'll work together and what we will hold as kind of our core as we advance that work. I also want to note, and Brenda, you missed a little bit of this explanation, but we'll have processes to flesh these things out more in our planning phase with a larger group. This is really to get us going for our application and set the stage for what we're going to do during planning.
This is Katie. If I had the opportunity to stare off into space and set up a set of primary values, I absolutely would have chosen these. And the one observation I would make is process-wise, as usual, the devil is in the detail, which is the mechanisms, the strategies, the actual outreach techniques and methods that we use, because these goals, these values are, I think, close to all of our hearts and minds. And as we work with people out in the world, these don't always mean something to them intrinsically. They could see these and it wouldn't necessarily provide them with information to give to you, to us, as to how that translates into them actually feeling included and heard. So I think these values are spot on, and I'm mindful as we move forward that Group A will want it to look like this for them to feel as if these values are being met, and Group B might want something totally different. I know I'm stating the obvious, but I just know the devil is in the detail.
Really appreciate that comment. Totally agree. And as we launch from these values or values iterated from this, I think that operation, like defining shared definitions and operationalizing, is going to be a really important part of that foundational work.
Is there, would this come later, but is there an opportunity for a value around shared prosperity? In other words, which may not be for this committee, but I think it's values oriented, that there are dollars available for the planning phase, and that folks and or CBOs supporting a group that's participating in a listening session or on this or on all these committees will have an opportunity to be to enter into a small agreement or be compensated for their time. So I don't know if that would be called a shared prosperity or if that's more outcomes oriented.
No, thank you, Brenda. I think we'll kind of think about what language we might put to that, or where it would nest. But I also think that's really relevant to this subcommittee, because that's part of the capacity building for people to be able to participate. So what are the ways that people need to be resourced and supported to do that? So we'll get into that piece of it a little bit more.
Any more questions or comments before we move on? All right, thank you, everybody. Alana, if we can bring back the slide and maybe move on to the next slide. Thank you. So the next piece of our workshop this morning, before we move into discussion, we want to spend a few minutes kind of setting up or providing an overview of a framework for how we're thinking about capacity building for the CERF. When you talk about capacity building, that's a very broad topic. There are many different components to it. So we think it's helpful to kind of start with setting the stage and talking about, what is the ultimate goal in terms of capacity building? What is the ultimate goal per the CERF guidelines that we're trying to achieve here in this program? What is the framework through which we're trying to do that? And what are the activities that are involved or that should be involved, again, kind of per the guidelines that the CERF has put out for the planning phase. So per the CERF guidelines, the kind of ultimate goal here, when you talk about capacity building, is to develop or increase the ability of communities to organize or access inclusive economic planning efforts, access funds, or implement projects in the future. The framework through which we're trying to achieve this goal is an inclusive economic development framework. And we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about what goes into that and what that means in the context of the CERF. And then some of the activities that the CERF has called out in its guidelines, you're seeing in the kind of rectangles cutting across the middle of the slide here. So for instance, strengthening local coordination, leadership, knowledge, skills, expertise, and access to resources, identifying and planning for economic transitions, and identifying the tools and resources needed to plan inclusively for a region's economic future. And then we also want to acknowledge, and that's, if you look at the rectangle at the bottom, or the shape at the bottom of the slide, we also want to acknowledge that a lot of this work is already being done in our region when we think about capacity building. And part of this process is figuring out how to kind of feed that ongoing work into our CERF process and making sure we're leveraging that. You're seeing 3 examples here at the bottom of the slide. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, and there are many other sort of capacity building related activities taking place. But for example, I know we have California Capital here on the line, the work the Small Business Development District is doing, the work, for example, that United Way is doing around providing this capacity building to support to different community-based organizations. And as Tracy mentioned earlier, the Inclusive Economic Development Coalition that the Sacramento Asian Chamber is steering. So again, just some of the examples in this space. Next slide, please. So as I said, we'll talk a little bit more about, in the CERF program, what do they mean when they use this phrase inclusive economic development, or what is the framework that they're talking about with inclusive economic development? So the CERF program sort of explicitly recognizes that, not all Californians have had the same opportunities to participate in our state's economy. And then with the onset of the pandemic, the kind of uneven economic recovery trends that we've seen among different populations and communities has only served to kind of further exacerbate that inequity that was already existing even prior. Given that, the state is really embracing, as a goal for state policy, this idea of embracing economic equity, as well as striving to enhance regional economic resilience and supporting the development of more inclusive and resilient regional economies. So what does that all mean? So you'll see there at the bottom of the slide, ultimately what this means for the CERF is, number one, it's embracing a regional approach. So meeting regions and subregions where they are in their economic development process. It also means taking a high roads approach that favors businesses that invest in their workforces, pay living wages, and engage in environmentally sustainable business practices. It also means a process and outcomes that are community and worker centered as part of that inclusive economic planning process. And it means that, we have to make a very sort of deliberate and robust effort to make sure that the voices that have been left out of more traditional economic development processes are being included in this CERF process. Next slide, please. So to kind of wrap up this overview of our framework discussion, we wanted to spotlight another regional example here. I know some folks on this call are probably familiar with the Fresno Drive initiative. So the Fresno Drive is a 10-year investment plan to develop an inclusive, vibrant, and sustainable economy for residents in the greater Fresno region. And Fresno Drive, it has sort of 3 essential components that make it up. These are first, neighborhood development, second, human capital, and third, economic development. And as part of this Fresno Drive, as part of the Fresno Drive initiative, they put a lot of emphasis on this idea of developing a resident-centered and resident-driven strategy. But in order to do that in an effective and meaningful way, it requires a significant amount of capacity building to be able to really integrate that into the process. So, Fresno Drive has sort of recognized that capacity building is a necessary component, and it includes a whole space of activities such as organizing resident leaders, providing them skills to help determine their own future and learn by taking on larger projects and complex policy changes that can strengthen the different neighborhoods. And the Fresno Drive initiative has really made an effort to really just focus in on this capacity building and build it into their kind of theory of change as they're thinking about that 10-year investment strategy. So that's kind of the image you're seeing on the right-hand side of the slide. They call it out, one of the sort of activities that they really call out is, initiatives that they really call out is explicit programmatic priorities to promote racial equity in the drives, initiatives, and investment plans. And that in turn results in strengthened capacity among different communities and institutions. And together that feeds into being able to achieve Fresno Drive's economic growth and development goals. So again, just sort of an example of another regional, broad regional effort where capacity building is really a kind of a pillar of that, and a pillar of making sure that you can stay true to that engaging community, engaging residents, and having them drive or help drive the strategy. Next slide, please.
Hey, can I jump in, Isa? I had a thought. I think that that's a great example of kind of building capacity for resident leaders and neighborhood leaders, which I think is great, and we should talk about that as it relates to our program. I also just want to talk about other ways of, in my mind, of capacity building that might lend to the effort we're doing here, which includes supporting community-based organizations to be able to participate in a process. It could look like helping support, fiscal, like the ability to do the fiscal processes to participate in a federal or state grant program. It could be about, just simply resourcing, or it could be about skill building and learning together as a cohort. So I just wanted to kind of think about a broad definition of capacity building as we enter in this conversation, that it could exist among a variety of different levels as part of the initiative.
Thank you, Evan.
I see Doreen has her hand up.
Hey, I'm experiencing some issues with my internet today, so joining on my iPad, it's not really working. But anyway, sorry I missed the introduction. Starring Hackler, an equitable economic development consultant. And one of the things that when we did a deep dive on Fresno Drive and a number of other national equitable economic development initiatives around the United States for the Pew Center Foundation, we found that it's not just about what you were saying, Evan, just training in the technical capacity, but when we're trying to have these public budgeting conversations, but also economic development investment committee conversations, like what we set up in Sacramento through Project Prosper and the Economic Action Agenda, there's the same leaders that often come to the table, but if we really want residents to get involved, we need to actually give them the capacity to understand. And I think the conversation that was yesterday during the data and research was really relevant in terms of the jargon. Like there's just comments that people make, and it's not the same in an asset building community, and an economic development building community, and a business community and everything. And I think that maybe that type of level setting and making sure that we set the table in those ways that we understand people come from different positions, but we also have that ability to give decision tools to make them feel like they have the capacity to make those decisions is really important. So I'm glad that we're taking that on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Any other questions?
Hi, so somehow you guys just muted, but I unmuted. So I'm not technologically together enough to even figure out how to raise my hand electronically. So I'm going to be doing this. I had a couple of stray thoughts about the application strategy. So I want to emphasize, for the work that we've done with small disadvantaged communities, face-to-face outreach, not always relying on computer-based methodologies for communication, going to them. So what this boils down to is a strategy that we've used is a circuit rider or riders whose sole function is to circulate, communicate, share input, both to and from, so that there's a way for folks to have a voice in the process without always having to do Zoom calls, but a more personal direct outreach, or somebody or a small group of somebodies that they come to know and trust. So two other things: a grant database that actually enables people to be proactive with discerning funding sources that they believe fit for them, but associated with that, a proposal preparation support, because we've worked with numerous small entities. They can see the funds that they're eligible for, but they have no capacity. You know what these applications are like? They're like, yowie. So you have to be a real adult to write these. And I mean that not judgmentally, but functionally. And a lot of these entities don't have the situational support. So in terms of the application, as we think forward, think about doing some sort of circuit ride. And the third and last thing is, given the caliber of people that are on this call, I'm betting you that there are numerous projects in place that could be demo projects within this planning phase to demonstrate either processes, outcomes, approaches that could essentially be mini case studies or pilot studies within the planning grant for some of these outfits, entities, individuals, organizations that have something that could contribute either as a model or as an outcome to the implementation phase, and would appropriately be subsidized during the planning.
I can find my mute button. Thank you so much for that. Great thoughts. And I do want to note, I'll take Brenda's question in a minute. We're about to go into a phase where we really have a process to capture some of these comments that you all are making. So I do want to get into this really great discussion that we're starting to get into. And I also want to intro this Jamboard session so we can start writing things down and ensure that we're kind of getting them all laid out. Brenda.
Question on slide 12. It showed prioritization of high road jobs. My understanding of the CERF program is also that we're looking at high road transitions. So yes, supporting existing high road opportunities, but also as part of the planning and then implementation phase, diving deep into how do we transition jobs that are not currently high road to high road, given opportunities and resources. So I think the transition part was also something that was important as part of CERF, not just existing high road.
Great, thank you for that, Brenda. Okay, Isa, do we want to go ahead and intro? Is that where we are to intro our Jamboard session?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull up my screen share in a second. Okay. So as part of the next portion of this workshop, we're going to be diving in and tackling together some discussion questions as a group. And we have this tool called a Jamboard that is going to help us do that. So I'm going to walk us through the tool really briefly. I know some folks may be familiar with this, but this also may be, we also have some folks who I think are maybe seeing this for the first time. So this tool is called a Jamboard. It is essentially a virtual whiteboard is the way that I like to describe it. So hopefully you all are seeing my cursor move here. We are going to put a link into the chat shortly. And if you click that link, it'll take you to exactly what you're seeing on the screen right now. So up here, you'll see that there are sort of 7 different slides or whiteboards, and each slide or whiteboard holds a different question. And so you can navigate back and forth between these different questions using the arrows on the left and right side. And I'll go through as well, I'll read through these questions as well after I walk through the tool. So that's, you see, that's kind of what I'm doing now, navigating back and forth between the arrows to get to the different questions. And then on the left-hand side of the tool, right over here, these are kind of the different ways that you can write or put things into the Jamboard or the slides. I think the easiest tool to use is this small square one here, which is kind of like a virtual sticky note. So if you click this, click the sticky note, something like this will pop up. You can pick whatever color you would like. And then you can type whatever it is, whatever answer input you want to give in response to that question. Once you hit save and then exit out by clicking cancel, you'll see that your post-it note appears here, and then you can kind of hold it down and move it wherever you want on the whiteboard. And Valley Vision staff will also pitch in by kind of helping group different post-its together that are kind of in the same theme or have similar answers. So that's how to use this Jamboard tool. Let me go back. I'll note that the kind of first slide out of these 7 is just a list of all the questions that we'll be tackling. Evan, maybe I'll read through these questions and kind of preview them for folks, and then we can get started on kind of tackling them, or we can give folks a chance to kind of plug into the Jamboard and fill things in. So the first question here, what comes to mind when you think of capacity building? The second question, where have you seen successful capacity building efforts, and what do they include, for example, in terms of skills, resources, or activities? The third question, what would you or your communities, the people you serve, the organizations you work with, need to be able to participate in this planning effort? The fourth question, what would you or your communities, again, the people you serve or the organizations you work with, need to be able to advance implementation projects? And finally, what learning and development would the collaborative need to effectively advance inclusive economic development?
So in terms of, first of all, I want to give a chance to anyone to ask any questions about these questions, make sure that we're kind of all clear about what we're talking about. But the idea is, I think, starting with our page 2 question, is to start thinking together, what does capacity building really look like in your mind? Kind of what are some of the fundamentals that come to you? And we've already heard some great ideas on this. And then going to the next question, Isa, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so to really get more concrete, so where have we seen this happen before, and what kind of concrete activities did you see that worked really well? And again, we've already heard some great ideas on this. And then the third question, or on the fourth slide, what do you need, or what would the people that you work with need? And that's really about planning and about process, so participating in this CERF planning process. And then finally, I just wanted to give a little more context to this to advance implementation project. So our CERF planning project is all about developing projects to implement. And so this is more about capacity for project development, and to really be able to think through what would you need to have your project totally ready to go and have the state sign off on it and approve it. And then finally, on the last question, this is really about our capacity as a collaborative, right? So we're building this regional vision making process. And we want different outcomes maybe than what we've had in the past, or the whole idea of the CERF program is to do things differently in order to get to more equitable and more inclusive processes and more equitable outcomes. So what do we need to do differently? So what kind of things do we need to learn? What skills do we need to develop together? How do we need this collaborative to be different than what we've seen in the past? So a little bit more about the questions. And then the other thing I'll say is, if speaking of capacity, if Jamboard doesn't work for you, then you can write things down and just say them, and we'll put them on the card for you. We're going to do some screen sharing so that we can see what everybody's putting up. You can also put things in the chat, and we'll help kind of make sure that gets on the board as well. So you can participate in this in a variety of different ways. We want to make sure that everybody has the is able to get their ideas heard. And then the final thing I'll say is, in a minute, we're going to just give everybody maybe 4 minutes or so to think and to start to write things down or put them in the Jamboard without us talking. And I really want to note that I know that everybody has a different way of thinking or learning or interacting with others that works well. So want to make sure that that we give you time to think and to write, and acknowledge that sometimes on our virtual world, silence feels more awkward than it would if we were all in a room together writing on a piece of paper. So just acknowledging that we're gonna go silent here for a few minutes, and I hope that you all will start populating these boards, or writing on a piece of paper and getting ready to share your ideas verbally, or starting to put things in the chat. But however you do it, we really want to hear your ideas. And Isa, am I forgetting anything before we go offline? And if for anybody else, any questions or comments before we jump into this activity? Okay. Then let's get started. Thanks, everyone. Okay, do people need more time? Or are we ready to start discussing? Anybody can raise your hand or speak up if you feel like you need a little bit more time. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump into a discussion then. Maybe we could bring a screen share back up and we can go question by question and talk through the comments that we have here. And then if more ideas are coming, please, feel free to keep populating our boards. Okay, so our first intro question is, what comes to mind when you think of capacity building? And we tried to group them lightly for some key topics. So I'm just going to kind of go through our topics, and I'm going to invite people to make comments, add more detail, or share ideas as I do that. So I'll be pausing a lot and asking people to chime in. So starting on the left-hand corner, we've got some things focused on underserved communities. So capacity to build wealth and asset development programs for underserved communities, demographics, needs focused in a community up approach, intentional focus on supporting underserved communities. I will pause there. Anybody want to say anything more about these comments related to specifically to building capacity in underserved communities?
This is Katie. I guess one thing I would say is there's such a distance at times between stated articulated intention and people's experience on the ground. So I think capacity building means something different to big picture thinkers at times than it does to the people whose capacity you're building. And there's an implication of inadequacy that some of the constituencies that I've worked with are viscerally respond to. So blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it just popped into my mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. And while you were talking, I was also kind of looking at this. I'm just doing some light rearranging here. So kind of moving into this cultivating community championships or champions. So first, recognizing there's a broad range of current understanding of CERF and other community engagement activities, we should consider identifying a team of community leaders who can help. The value of champions in the community organizing, developing resident skill sets, and effectively communicating their needs, wants, and or policy goals. So Katie, your comments made me think of that bridge a little bit, but this is, moving from building capacity in underserved communities, but then also really focusing on building champions. Anybody who wrote those cards or, have anything else you want to share about that? Okay. Then I'm going to keep rolling on. We have these three cards right here. And again, our organization is just very much on the fly, so I'll probably miss some things, but so developing shared language and understanding of terms, equity focused and language inclusion, language and cultural appropriateness. And I wonder, especially this equity focused and language inclusion, do you want to say, whoever wrote that, do you want to say a little bit more around your thoughts on that card?
Sure, that was me, Evan. Sorry, I was having a hard time getting off. So with the work that we do, you know, with the Sacramento Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative, you know, we recognize that, you know, not everyone, you know, English is not their primary language. And so I think, you know, with us really looking at how we can engage with you know, everyone, we have to be able to identify community leaders that are known within the areas that we're trying to, you know, dive a little deeper into. And then we also need to be able to provide in language support, you know, for folks. I mean, Juan is on the phone, who's one of our SAC IEDC collaborative partners. And so we provide a great variety of language assistance, both written, verbal, and then also, you know, virtually and in person. So just food for thought for us as we're moving forward. I think we definitely need to incorporate that into our activities.
Thank you, Tracy. That's really helpful. And for others who talked about developing shared language and cultural appropriateness, anything else that you'd like to say to offer more detail?
Even if
go ahead.
Sorry, and I think along those lines, and it goes with my community app approach, at times we need to meet the need where it is at, not developing frameworks that we believe will work and essentially create results that either do not work with what we were expecting and not necessarily addresses the real needs and the real issues happening that would drive the real solutions. And that goes with language, that goes with how the strategy is focused, not only from a programmatic perspective and a strategic perspective, but from a culture perspective, and how everything is said, again, to ensure that it actually tackles the needs that are needed to be addressed.
Great, thank you, Juan. And then Katie, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, and this comes from a person who's English speaking, so I don't want to imply a knowledge that I don't personally have experientially. The one experiential observation I will make is that numerous of the populations that we've worked with have said two things. With your written materials, they need to be colloquially translated, and a fixation on word for word can make you totally zero impact. The other thing that we've heard is to be sensitive to different regional nuances of expression. So something that's translated from folks who come from Colombia or Chile reads different than folks who've come from Mexico or Guatemala. And I just say that as observations that have been made to me, not because I know.
Well, thank you. That's important nuance to think about. I appreciate that. And I see in this whole column of cards, there's also been, speaking of kind of cultivating community champions, there's involving trusted and established messengers and social influencers has been added. So across that left-hand column, I think we've got some of the, so building capacity within underinvested communities, building those championships, thinking about communication, developing shared and culturally appropriate language, and inclusive language and in communication. I'm gonna go to the next column over where we have, I think this is more about community-based organizations and building capacity for those CBOs. So we have training opportunities for nonprofits, learning cohorts for community-based organizations, just generally building capacity for community-based organizations, professional and organizational development opportunities, working in collaboration with community-based organizations for participation in registered apprentice programs. I'm going to finish reading, then I'll go back to some of these to ask questions. Tools, technology, and equipment to engage, personnel, developing and strengthening skills and abilities, and resources that organizations and communities need to survive, adapt, and thrive. So overall, anybody want to offer any thoughts or comments about this, this kind of category of cards that I just read? In that case, I will jump in and ask this question, or ask a question about this card. So working in collaboration with community-based organizations for participation in registered apprenticeship programs. Does somebody want to talk in a little bit more detail about this idea of registered apprenticeship programs and what you're thinking behind that?
Yeah, this is Jason Rafter, the apprenticeship director for the Ironworkers apprenticeship program. Like I said, I live in Sutter County, and I know there's a lot of counties up north where it's hard because we have an apprenticeship program that is based in Sacramento, and we try to reach out as much as possible to as many different community-based organizations that we can. But it's hard because, you know, changes in personnel or different things like that. And we just don't get the opportunity to talk to them as much as we would like to, because I know that there are valuable workers that are seeking a career, you know, and registered apprenticeship is a great start for a promising career with dignity, with good wages and, you know, a pension and a retirement. And it's just having the opportunity to meet with them, have our apprenticeship coordinators meet with them in the different geographical areas so that we can ensure that they're represented. And the people that live in these outlying areas, again, I live in Sutter County, and the town that I live in has a population of 220. So, you know, when I graduated from high school there was no apprenticeship program that came out and said, hey, you know, what do you plan to do for your future? I just was able to stumble across the opportunity to jump into the Ironworkers apprenticeship, which for me paid dividends throughout my career. So, I mean, just being able to talk with the individuals and allow their participants the opportunity to come down and check out what we have to offer.
That's great. Thank you for that detail. It's really helpful. Yeah, Katie.
And if I could just follow up on that quickly, one of the reasons why I mentioned the idea of a couple of demonstration projects is that we've identified the combination of circuit riding with career development components, with connections with local junior colleges and high schools as a way to address the exact issue that he just spoke to. And it seems to me that this reaching out to more rural young people who wouldn't ever think of a career track of X, you provide them with a description of career track X and something fires for them and you get them in.
Great, thank you. Great conversation in detail here. I was going to ask a question too about tools, technology, and equipment to engage. Any more detail or further thoughts about what that might look like? All right, that's okay. We can leave it there. And I see we're still adding some cards. So looking down here at the bottom, we have be sensitive to the regional nuance of expression, assist with outreach and career exposure with emphasis on rural. Good, so reflecting the comments that we're verbalizing. I'm gonna go to the next kind of grouping of cards, and I'm not sure what the category is. We'll see as we read them out loud. But I think it's about alignment and working together. Alignment of partner organizations responsible for outreach and implementation, clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, clear understanding of the collective impact model. Great. A true collaborative and inclusive process for this effort. sustainable, accountable, cohesive strategy. As organizations support for each other, and co-developing metrics to evaluate inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impacts of success to reach targets, and aligning responses to opportunities for funding to create partnerships and identify redundancies to make proposals stronger. Or maybe I'll include this card over to the side too. Capacity building exists at multiple levels: individual, person, institutional, and systemic, and we need to address all three. Okay, so there's a loose category. There's a few different nuances to this, but overall, thinking about this grouping of cards that I just read, I think, having to do with how we're working together as a collaborative and how we're supporting each other and developing common standards. Anybody want to dive in deeper, comment on anything that you've heard here, or anything that you wrote as part of this?
Hi, Evan. This is Sui. Something just came to mind as we're going over the notes. Capacity building, as I look at it, should be looked at as a very low ROI investment that we have to make into our community in terms of capacity building, whether we're building our program or whether we're building our CBO and expanding their capacity building. As I looked at the work that we've done with our CBO in SBDC outreach, there is so much time and resources invested to helping them understand how our program operates, as well as identifying a community liaison who can potentially do the outreach on our behalf. And it's looking at the amount of time and the hours that we have to spend in training them, providing them training to bring them to understanding what we do. And that's something that cannot be measured by performance metrics. I think we have to recognize that as part of the effort. I just wanted to throw it out there.
I could not agree with that more. Thank you for stating it the way you stated it was great. I could not agree more.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to go to our last grouping that's on here. This is really about resources and funding, I believe. So money and people, organizations to implement the programming, financial resources, funding, having sufficient supportive resources to extend our capacity building efforts to help our CBOs build theirs, funded, guided training, and money. So I'm going to open the floor again. Anybody want to add any comments, details, further thoughts about this topic of making sure that community-based organizations and others are funded and supported by staffing as well to participate in an effort? Okay, I'll leave it there. And I think these themes are going to come up again. I also just want to say this is such great conversation and feedback and things that we're getting on the Jamboard. So thank you so much for your thoughts here. And I can also see Valley Vision staff is continuing to put cards up to reflect the comments that people are making. So let's go to the next question. And this is really about where have you seen successful capacity building efforts and what have those included? And I'm just going to start. I don't think these are grouped because these are examples of things going on in the region or maybe things that we're aware of from outside our region. So I'm going to start reading and I'll do the same thing and kind of ask if people want to add more detail. So first, Sierra Health Foundation's Health Leadership Program. Anybody want to talk in more detail about that program? Okay. And these are, regardless of what level of detail, these are great resources as we think about how we're building capacity in our region. So the James Irvine Foundation Strategic Approach for Definition Success. Anybody have any comments or details on that program? All right, I'm going to keep rolling through that. Maybe I'll just keep slow rolling through this and jump in, please, if you'd like to add anything. United Way using established community-based organization networks, family resource centers to distribute resources within communities during the initial pandemic crisis when everything was shut down, using established networks with trusted relationships in the community and building on that. And for these cards where you see things cut off, if you click into it, you can see the entire comment. Excellent. And I think this was one that Isa referred to as well at the beginning as a possible example. I'm going to keep rolling through. So we've got building healthy communities. The Sacramento BHC are building healthy communities. And then BHC efforts included creating smaller action teams based on issue areas, trainings and workshops, creating an equity framework, building a collective with shared ideas and vision. Very excellent. And I think I saw, yeah, that Kim Williams had joined us, and I know you missed intros at the beginning, Kim. If you're there, I don't want to put you on spot. Do you want to talk about BHC a little bit?
Sure. Hello. So yeah, and thanks for all the others who said BHC, appreciate it. I will say one of the things that I think one of the reasons Building Healthy Community was successful was, let's be honest, there was a nice infusion of dollars from the California Endowment. So that definitely made it a lot easier to do certain things. But pulling the folks together to really create a shared understanding, vision, that took time and effort. But I think one of the things that worked was, having the smaller action teams that were issue focused so that you didn't have people you had people working in areas that they were passionate about, that they wanted to work in, and working with other like-minded folks, I think helped to do that. We spent a lot of time doing trainings and workshop and helping people understand what systems change work was. We did workshops helping folks understand how to do fundraising. We did workshops on how to build capacity. A lot of our organizations were small. And so we had to, help uplift them and help them grow capacity. So providing training opportunities and additional resources, I think, really helped us to do that. And recognizing the areas that we were working in and respecting the culture, the different ethnic groups that we were working with and what their needs were in their communities. And I think centrally focusing our work on those areas that really needed it and were traditionally disinvested in. And so how could we help make sure those community members and residents were able to achieve the things or receive the services and things that they needed. So I think the collective model of having a backbone agency, but also having organizations who could kind of coalesce around those things is really what made Building Healthy Communities successful. And the connections between those organizations, the communities, as well as elected officials and things like that.
Thank you so much for that, Kim. Super helpful and a great model, and an acknowledgement that it does take an infusion of resources, and that's one of the really promising things about the CERF opportunity as well, is that there's some resource and ability to support capacity building and processes in the region. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling through. Aspen Institute Impact Areas Focus plus grants and capacity building opportunities. And I'll read a few and then I'll pause. As mentioned, circuit riding, a will come to you strategy to assist in fuller participation. Be sure that outreach includes multiple language and also venues for communication, including radio, social networks, church groups, local newsletters, informal networks of small businesses and entrepreneurs. And I'll pause there. Anybody want to mention anything about Aspen Institute, circuit riding, or the comment that I just read about multiple languages and venues? Okay, then I'll go to the Sacramento Food Policy Council, resource technical assistance for understanding policy issues. And I know both Brenda and Paul are here. Do you want to say a few words about this work? Maybe we've lost Paul, actually. Oh, Brenda, you're on mute.
Good morning. So yeah, I think one of the things that we found successful in building capacity efforts was really something I said on the other screen around community organizing, is us just helping policymakers and also residents, impacted communities, understand policy issues. And then, that builds both the capacity for both entities. And so that's kind of where our bailiwick is partnering with jurisdictions and helping them understand what's the pulse on the street for some food and farming issues, food access issues, and then also helping residents understand how they can effectively interact with policymakers and jurisdictions or departments, and hearing from them directly and how they can be involved. So sometimes it's, depending on the issue, can be heady, or it can just mean, it can be also something light as just having information of how to interact with policymakers and providing spaces and opportunities for people to connect, and having issues forums on that, on these issues. Another strategy that we found effective in activities, I think several folks, and Kim alluded to it earlier, is just having plenty of working groups or opportunities for folks to gather together and bring their ideas together and work with other folks that think like them and want to see the same changes in the communities. So yeah, making sure that the working groups aren't just left on their own to work it out, but they're staffed and resourced. I think that's really effective as well.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we've got a few here from outside the region, so I'll go to those. Portland's Inclusive Business Resource Network, Atlanta's Economic Mobility, Recovery and Resiliency Plan, KPP's non-siloed orgs across each pathway to success, and the Upper Cumberland TN Logic Model and integration of opioid affected individuals into the workforce. These all sound really interesting examples. Does anyone who shared these cards want to say more about any of them?
Hi, this is Doreen. So this is some of the work that we did for the same time we did the drive for Fresno. And each of them just utilize a different way of setting tables and having communication. So the Portland Inclusive Business Resource Network took all the actual providers to entrepreneurial support for BIPOC owners to help them figure out how to set their own success factors, and so that they were actually thinking about not just getting money and number of visits and things like that, but to how they help the actual business be more successful. So they came together and set their own evaluation criteria. So I think it's very important for capacity building when you're talking about those type of organizations, what works for them. Atlanta, those key performance performance criteria basically, and making sure that organizations, like if you had a pathway about career success, it wasn't just workforce development groups that were in there. There's a whole bunch of different types of organizations that touch that. And then I think the Upper Cumberland, Tennessee, they utilize this logic model to kind of set the goals for the actual community across workforce and economic development and community-based organizations and healthcare sectors, because they were finding a workforce crisis in terms of they were losing a lot of their individuals to the opioid crisis. So how do we make those individuals more comfortable with getting back into the system? And that takes a whole range of a continuum of support. And so just thinking about what that capacity building and those techniques mean in terms of bringing everybody to the table on an equal footing is, I think, an important lesson.
That's great. Those all sound like great resources and examples. Thank you. And then we have the Ministerial Association of Colusa County. During the pandemic, they were able to support residents and businesses through collaborative efforts with other organizations. I know we have a few folks here from Colusa. Anybody want to say more about this?
It's Jennifer Diaz. I can. So again, during the pandemic, as the Colusa County Chamber of Commerce, we were able to access to a whole bunch of PPE items and things like that that were to be dispersed solely to businesses. And, you know, with the shutdown and everything, I needed help with the Ministerial Association to get these items out to businesses, and they really stepped up to the plate. In the meantime, you know, while they're collaborating with their own community members, they were able to come back to me and explain to me other things that they would need to help support and everything. And so I was able to get those or become a hub because there was a lot of, as we know, you know, there was a lot of pandemic EBT cards going out. There were residents that needed food, shelter, clothing, and the Ministerial Association also works very closely with the behavioral health in Colusa County. So it was just a great opportunity to work and see them come together and really support the residents in the community.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, then we have our last grouping of cards over here. And I think these are kind of about some of the activities that have been included in successful capacity building efforts. So that includes training and skills for underemployed and new job seekers, mentorship, one successful org or effort paired with another smaller one, newer to the process. Directly through our program, our capacity building work directly helps small businesses access capital and scale their operations. Externally, we make intentional efforts to invest our time and resources, including financial support to help our community-based organizations build and co-host their business training program with us. I'll read this last card, then we'll pause for questions on these cards. Intentional training on identified needs with funded technical staff working alongside entities that were building capacity. The IRWM DACI program is doing this. The SRFA DACI work plan included this for DAC, maybe that's disadvantaged communities, small water systems. Let's start with this card. Does someone want to offer a little bit more information about this program?
Hi, Evan. This is Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. So the Integrated Regional Water Management Program put out a specific targeted program that they called the DACI, Disadvantaged Community Involvement Program, that came out before the implementation grant rounds, and it was intended to develop more DAC projects that would go into implementation, and that's been more or less successful in different regions. But in the Sacramento River funding area, we started off with you know, the circuit riding that Katie mentioned, which was like one-on-one needs assessments with DAC, small water systems to identify needs. And then everything that happened after was kind of capacity building to address those needs. And it ranged from, you know, technical training to figuring out how to get funding, to figuring out how to develop a project for funding, to even, you know, community needs assessments. So it really, I mean, whether it's enduring in its success is still an open question because it's still an ongoing program. It's a 3-year program, but I think it was successful in developing capacity within those entities that we were able to work with, and that heavily relied on funded technical staff kind of walking, you know, different entities through how to address their needs. And I think that's really important.
Great, thank you so much. And that's a great example of helping get people ready for funding and doing the work to support that. So thanks so much for that. I wanted to also ask about the card above that, the small businesses accessing capital and scaling their operations. Does someone you want to talk a little bit more about that one?
Hi, Evan, it's me again. I wrote that. So through the SBDC program, our one-on-one technical assistance and advising services and training does just that, which is to help our small businesses scale, you know, start their business and grow their business. And I think that capacity, that's how we serve our small business community. But at another level, we also work with our community-based organizations to help them build their business training program, especially if, you know, there is language barrier for the different diverse community that's that's facing language barrier. We're making intentional effort to bring on a business advisor that speaks the language and has the business knowledge, and then train them to provide the TA and the capacity building services to the community. And at the same time, we're working with community-based organization that's interested in offering some type of either financial education or business training program to members of their own community by hosting them, providing a facility for them to host a workshop, as well as giving them some kind of financial assistance to help them do so. Obviously, CBOs, when they're small, they're always struggling for funding. And so we do what we can to provide some type of financial assistance in that area. That's what I meant by that.
Great. That sounds like a great program. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we got through all the cards. I'll pause, see if anybody has anything else they want to add before going on to the next.
Jason Rafter here. My card was the training and skills for the new job seekers and stuff like that. A successful capacity that we have used in the past is a pre-apprenticeship model where we allow students, and historically in the capacity that I was before as a coordinator for Sacramento, I would recruit heavily from all of our community colleges, Butte College, Yuba College, Sierra College, ARC, Consumnes, Shasta, Delta, because those were all the jurisdictions that I covered. And it just did not meet the demand, of people that we need for the ironwork and trade. And it was successful because we were able to get a lot of members in, but I mean, being able to reach out to all these other community-based organizations and have a larger funnel to get individuals down into it, I think it would be a successful way to build those efforts. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jason. Okay, any last thoughts or comments before we go to the next page? Okay. Okay, so our next page is what would you or your communities, the people you serve or the organizations you work with, need to be able to participate in this planning effort? And I'll just start reading cards. I haven't had a chance to look at these categories yet. So communication, actionable items, staffing of resources. I'll just go column by column. We definitely will need in-language support for key constituents and should engage with community leaders already embedded in these areas as they have built the necessary trust and rapport that we are looking for. Appropriate language, including culturally appropriate and effective communication, coordination, and staffing of processes. So would anyone like to speak more? That we're really talking about communication here, both communication and staffing support, and then communicating with community leaders or other constituents, I think. Any thoughts or additions there? Okay, I'm going to keep rolling to our next column then. And it looks like this is going to be about both staffing and resources. So meeting participation assistance. We know this, or know the state hates the word stipend, so whatever you call it, it's the impact that matters and demonstrates commitment to the actual participation. Resources to support meeting participation. Wondering about open source digital resources to educate, empower the stakeholders. Staffing and funding to really dive headfirst into the effort. All right, and I do believe for the CERF program, I don't know if they call it stipend, but I know that it's an expectation of the state agencies that those participating in meetings will have be compensated for their time. The person who wrote wondering about open source digital resources to educate, empower the stakeholders. Do you want to say anything more about what your thoughts were?
Yep, that's me. And I'm just thinking about digital solutions overall for workforce development. There are some parts of the nation and even parts of the state that have more open source resources for like where training programs are located or career exploration tools or that sort of thing. And I'm just thinking more about developing system-wide digital solutions that all stakeholders can access, including community members if we do the languaging right, or through stakeholders to community members. So digital solutions overall.
Great, thanks, Renee. And I see an added to the resources column. So compensation for time and effort from stipends through foundations that government funding can't cover. Gift cards, free childcare, transportation, and joint activities that also benefit them. Think job fair, mobile library, health checks, etc. Great. Okay. So going over to the next column, please jump in if you have more detail to add. So I think this is about participating. We'll see what our theme is. Education on how this effort synergizes and links to or doesn't with other efforts. Invitation to participate with clear roles defined and benefits for participation outlined. Great, maybe those are the two together. So talking about creating a clear sense of both the alignment and the benefit and the roles of participating in the collaborative. Anybody want to add anything about either of these two cards? Okay, and then looking at
yeah, Evan, I wrote the pink one. But yeah, making sure that as we move along in both in the planning and implementation, I think this one is really important, so that folks and organizations, CBOs, can determine for themselves what group or collaboration or coalition is worthy of their time and effort. And I have a sense that because the CERF program is pretty from that, well, we all deserve more funding, but it's pretty robustly funded. It's one of maybe one of the attraction points of a lot of voices coming in, but we should be very, hopefully folks understand and we communicate very well how this effort supports and can align other efforts, or doesn't if there are any policy opportunities also. So yeah. Folks will have to decide. Folks just have to decide, you know, which coalitions, which meetings, which efforts they're going to be behind. And if we're not clear on that, that whether CERF isn't going to solve every problem for every entity, or is it, and how, you know, and I think about this a lot as the Food Policy Council. You know, how do food and farming and environmental justice issues fit within CERF? And I think, you know, on some pieces, it's probably not going to have a very strong synergy other than the policy linkages. So I think that messaging is going to be really important, so that we always go to communities for community engagement, and we don't spin our neighborhoods, you know, over promising and say, well, that's not really the role of this effort, when folks' efforts could have been over here making maybe the other change that they were looking for, you know, for community health or other job training opportunities. So I think the messaging is going to be really important.
Thank you for that, Brenda. And just to dwell on that for a minute, I do want to note it is important to put parameters on what this opportunity is and what it can speak to it and what it can't. And I think that'll be a goal kind of early on in the planning phase, is to really flesh out what are the core priorities that we're driving towards. And when Isa presented some of the key goals of the program around high roads jobs and economic transition and some of those items, you know, that's what we're going to anchor to the whole time. And it is a robust funding for a planning process. It's also an 8-county region and a one-time source of funding. So I think it will be important to really use our resources wisely and in a targeted way. So just wanted to note that as well. But thank you. Okay, so looking at this bottom cluster, in addition to the open source comment from Renee, there's also accessible channels, usually program or project specific. Most people won't participate in a more ethereal presentation like this. They need more concrete ways to participate. and then the language of a partnership. Does anyone want to comment on either of those two cards? All right. Keep moving. Some type of financial incentives would be helpful. We are nonprofits, and so are many of our CBOs who volunteer their time to participate in this type of conversation. And then proper and strategic integration and resources allocations, not an afterthought. All right, and I think this is, one thing I do want to note. First of all, how much we appreciate all of you participating in this particular conversation. I do know that it's taking your valuable time and is really geared towards people who are in it doing the work. As we get into planning and we're really trying to invite a broader audience, then we will be able to more intentionally think about stipends and accessible language and things like that. So appreciate that comment and thinking about the difference between as we're trying to kind of wrangle an application to get started and as we kind of go into the more intentional planning phase. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to the next. We're getting close to the end, and then we'll wrap up. But appreciate you hanging with us. Okay, we've got some clear columns here, so I'm going to start on the left. Staffing, staff, TA, additional resources for staff, financial assistance, and personnel. And we've seen that on some of the other columns as well. So I'll just pause for a second. Anything to add? And I'm going to keep rolling. And I should have started with a question, actually. So this is, what would you or your communities need to be able to advance implementation projects? So this isn't so much about participating in a planning process as project development. So we heard staff, resources, funding, capacity building, funding, resources. I'm going to keep rolling and then I'll ask for comments. Policy support, project eligibility criteria and guidelines are needed. We will want to survey our communities and allow folks to submit proposed projects. It will be helpful if we can provide a framework of what suitable SERF-ready project would look like. Agree, and that's still, I'll note that guidance hasn't come out from the state either. So that'll be something that we'll all want to keep an eye on. Communication supports, language needs and translation for all materials, meetings, trainings, etc. Some entities will need private unsupervised venues to share ideas without feeling they're being spied on. Really, I've heard this comment in multiple places. We can go back and talk about that a little bit more, but that good thought. And then internet access and time. So anybody who wrote any of these cards or have any questions or would want to comment on anything that I've just read here. All right, any more details about the private unsupervised venues? It sounds like people just need an open format, maybe without government or other entities listening to what they have to say, which I think makes a lot of sense. Okay, then I'm going to roll on to our last slide here, and this is really about learning and development of the collaborative itself. So that's the question: what learning and development would the collaborative need to effectively advance inclusive economic development? All right. Community buy-in, which can be hard to achieve, which can be hard to achieve in some areas. I think that to get this type of buy-in, we will need education, simplified language, and accessible tech. And I'm just going to read these as clusters again. There's so much mistrust of standard public sector funded projects that it will be imperative that we identify ways to show historically underinvested communities that we truly want to have their participation, and that we will listen and incorporate their needs and requests into the SERF. Any thoughts or comments on these two categories? I mean, on these two cards.
This is Katie. I would just say again that trust building, which is a huge term and has a jillion bullets underneath it, is going to be critical at every level. So small community all the way up to boards of supervisors.
Thank you, Katie. Absolutely. Okay, different platforms of communication in order to engage the community as a whole, youth committee and a young adult committee, accessible meetings that facilitate engagement across a wide audience, community organizing, fund development, data driving, program development. Anybody want to say anything about these cards? Love the idea of a youth committee. On the community organizing, fund development, data driving, program development, is that about learning? So the collaborative learning more about these topics?
Hi, Evan. This is Juan, and that was my card, and it's data-driven type of program development. I think that a lot of times we miss the mark as community organizations to try to stay focused on how we do things, how the programs are developed, but ensuring that there's a data component to not only measure what we do, but measure or how things are done, but also measure our impact is going to be really important. And I think that really goes into similar efforts that are currently undergoing in other collaboratives in which data is becoming the pillar of what they do. And I think that having a centralized effort to ensure that not only data is collected, managed, but also used to the benefit of everybody engaged will be important as we continue to move forward.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. I'm going to keep rolling on. So I have Job Corps, SETA, community colleges, Los Rios Community College, county offices of education, education on current workforce needs versus future planning, how both are important, even though future planning doesn't always seem relevant to those in impoverished communities, need to work now. And education on automation risk to jobs. So it looks like some of this is on both gaining more knowledge about current economic issues, and then also about communicating and vision setting, kind of making that bridge between now and later. Anybody have anything you want to add here? In the card mentioning the different workforce and education entities, is that just thinking about who might be able to assist in some of these learnings?
I wrote that one, but I haven't attended all your sessions or, party to the communications happening. But I haven't seen any of these organizations involved in this at all. So if we're not including them, how is this effort accountable towards this goal of advancing inclusive economic development if Job Corps, CETA, and these entities are not involved? So we need to learn from them, include them, or figure out how we're going to make sure that we incorporate the goals that those organizations have for serving their members and clients in the CERF effort. And then a second thought, I'll put it on a card just so it has a place to live, is automation and green jobs of the future. So how is CERF, what learnings do we need? Where in the project are we going to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that, those jobs of the future, which I think is encapsulated somewhat in the high road jobs, but not fully and not necessarily. There's also the next generation is more interested in those and probably has a different way of thinking about problems, solving their own problems and issues that were not included. So yeah, the youth committee one is also one I put on there that's really important.
Great. Thanks for that, Brenda. And I will note that there's been engagement, kind of a broad engagement across a variety of different activities. I think we've had over 150 people engaging in different aspects of this, including representatives from all of those entities who we often work with in other contexts as well. So we definitely are thinking carefully about bringing along and really involving our educational systems, our workforce systems for a really cohesive and comprehensive type strategy. Okay. How to address economic development without addressing fundamental barriers, affordable housing, land, capital, etc. So that would be a learning and development opportunity about, well, I'll ask you, but getting into some of the barriers to employment, it looks like. Demonstrate a clear understanding of the delicate balance between self, reservation, advancement, and the advancement of the whole. I'll pause on each of these questions or each of these cards. Does the people who wrote these want to say anything more about them?
Chad, this is Katie again, just saying that it's one thing for an individual entity to advocate and support what it thinks it needs. It's another thing for groups, you know this, Evan, you've experienced it, for groups to come together and prioritize some other entity's needs over their own, or give some other entity's needs common priority with theirs. So that's where the trust building and the process and all of that comes to, hopefully in year 3, a altruistic give and take where folks trust the process enough that they're willing to yield the floor, yield priority, yield a project to someone else's that they see will benefit them, even if it wasn't their first priority. That's all.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, and the last card we have on here, building common frameworks around processes, values, and expectations. So I'll pause one more time for this slide overall. Anybody have anything else you want to add or think about as we think about for this collaborative? How do we learn and develop together? Okay, well that takes us through our Jamboards. I know that takes a long time to do, but I just, wow, I really appreciate all of the thought that you all put into that, all of the resources that you've shared, and just incredibly valuable. And I hope that you also found value of talking through that and hearing other people's ideas and resources as well. Isa, I'll turn it back over to you to get into the final portion of our session here.
Thanks, Evan. We have just one more slide quickly on kind of next steps, so folks know what's coming after the session. So first, as we said at the front end, we are going to make all these materials and the Jamboards. We'll continue to keep the Jamboards open for at least the next 24 hours, and we'll include that all in a follow-up email together with all the materials you saw today, a recording of the session, the slides. That way, folks on this call, as well as folks who sign up for this committee but were not able to attend this session, can kind of review all that, and we'll also have an opportunity to plug ideas into the Jamboards as well. So that's the first next step. The second is on our end. We are going to take the discussion around the values as well as the Jamboard discussion and incorporate all of that input as well as the similar input we're getting from different subcommittees into our application, which, as we noted at the front end, is due on July 25th for the planning phase. And then finally, this last piece I want to mention, one of the requirements of the application is what the state is calling a collective partnership agreement letter, which essentially demonstrates to the state the kind of group of folks who have been involved in the process so far and who are committing to stay involved and stay engaged through the planning phase. So end of this week, we are going to start circulating this collective partnership agreement letter for folks to sign on to, again, as part of our application. And so just want to give a heads up on that is coming, and that you all will see that in your inbox. And we hope that you will sign on. This conversation has been, the input we've gotten from this has been so incredibly valuable to help shaping our application. And we hope to continue this engagement with you all moving into planning phase. So heads up on that coming into your inboxes in the next few days. And that wraps up our next steps. I'll turn it back to Evan and Valley Vision staff. Is there anything else to add on to close out?
Just a note on the collective partnership agreement letter. What you'll really see on that is a high-level vision, some kind of big picture goals, and the governance structure. So, kind of an outline of our collective wisdom about how we're going to launch this project. And then the ask of people who sign on is to provide a brief description of your organization or entity, a brief description of kind of your anticipated connection to the CERF planning table, and then a contact person in a signature. Is that right, Isa?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And in terms of what does a commitment look like to participate in the planning process? And one of the things you'll see is the governance structure, and we're working with a different subcommittee to kind of be starting to outline that out. And it will largely consist of, I think, a leadership structure that's where decision-making or the kind of top level decision-making resides. And that has to fit geographic representation and different categories of community representation, which include community-based organizations, employers, labor, workforce, education, government, nonprofits, philanthropy, and probably other categories, or like climate advocacy, probably some other categories that I'm not thinking of. But that letter will kind of lay out the categories, not the people or entities that are going to be making that up, as well as subtables. So then the idea, I think, is probably that from each of the subtables or the subgroups that we have, there'll be a chair or a liaison that also feeds into the leadership council. And so the idea of committing to participate, I think, is participating in the kickoff, considering that governance structure and what place you might see for yourself within it. And then, I think in terms of resource distribution, we're going to be laying out principles around supporting people to participate through stipends or other means, and then sourcing functions from work that's going on in our region. So really thinking about putting out RFP processes for people to fill different roles, as well as working with partners to to have this co-owned strategy about how the work's going to get done and how we're going to advance things. So I just wanted to give a very high level view of kind of what you would anticipate seeing early in the planning phase and how you might continue to feed into that. Brenda, yeah.
I apologize. I stepped away for a second and missed the next steps slide, but are we going to get a template letter to sign, or what? The 25th is around the corner. So
we're going to be circulating that. It's called the Collective Partnership Agreement. It's a pretty simple, so you're going to see in that the vision, the goals, the governance structure, and some of the high level things that reflect the conversations that we've had here and on other days, on other subcommittees. And then you'll have what we would be asking for from you would be an agreement to sign on. And I think they call it a signature page, which is a brief description of your organization, a brief description of kind of how you see yourself fitting into the process, or your organization fitting into the process. Contact name and signature, I think, is basically what they're looking for. So it's not a traditional letter of support. It's more of a brief summary of how you might plug into this. So I hope it'll be for those who are interested in signing that letter. I hope it'll be a pretty low bar. Like I said, we're going to start circulating that on Friday, and then we're going to ask for those back by the following Friday. So I know it is a short timeline. This whole application process is a short timeline, and we're doing our best to kind of meet the requirements that the state's put out there.
So yeah, so this Friday by next Friday then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Deborah, is there a requirement for each partner to get a board resolution stating support and approval for participation in the CERF effort? I think that depends on the requirements for signing on at each person's organization. So if you're able to sign on as the CEO or executive director, then that certainly works within our process. If that's something you would need a board resolution for to be able to do it, then that would be kind of your, you'd have to go through your own process there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I just know that on some of these proposals, the applicants are required to get that board resolution, but there isn't any requirement. So that's fine.
That's right. Okay.
Can it be
Okay.
can it be a digital signature? I'm going to be out of town next week.
Yes,
Very good.
it can be.
Thank you.
In fact, that's what we would encourage. Anything else would be complicated. Is this letter different than the one sent out from North State Planning and Development at Chico State Enterprises? It is different. I don't know what they sent out, but they're a different region. They're a different CERF region than we are. And so it's possible they're sending, for those of you who kind of do work in both the North State region and our region, it's possible that a different CERF region, like Chico State, has sent something out already. And that would be, if you were to sign on to that, it would be related to their CERF application. So so it is different, but it might be kind of speaking to the same thing. Okay, any other questions? All right, again, we just appreciate your time and attention to this so much. We know your time is valuable, and just this has been incredibly valuable for us, and I hope it has been for you too. As we said, we will certainly be in touch, and really looking forward to launching this work together and for the opportunity to continue to work with you all on these issues. So thank you so much and have a great day.